Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 14 Part 2 Shadow Monarch. Jin-Woo first stopped at the bank. He was curious how much money he'd saved up from selling essence stones. Although I've been too busy to come. As the squad leader, Jin-Ho was the one in charge of the essence stones. He had told Jin-Woo that he sold the essence stones as soon as the raids were done for the day and deposited the money into the account. He never mentioned in detail how much money there was. He goes on and on about anything and everything except finances. Jin-Ho didn't seem to have much interest in the topic. Maybe because he'd grown up rich and around money, it was the furthest thing from his mind. His main topics of conversation were celebrities, raids, and his favorite movies and songs. Though it was difficult to call it a conversation, Jin-Ho did most of the talking with Jin-Woo pitching in occasionally. Now that I think about it, despite being very talkative, Jin-Ho never mentioned his family. That was interesting. That had been the case for as far back as Jin-Woo could remember, from the very first time they'd met. Just as Jin-Woo concluded that this was odd, he arrived at the bank. I picked the wrong day. The ATMs were undergoing maintenance, so he had no other choice. Jin-Woo entered the bank, took a number, and waited his turn to see a teller. "Hello!" It was a female teller with a bob cut and a bright smile. She politely asked, "How may I help you?" "I'd like an updated bank statement, please." "Certainly." Still smiling, the female teller took his documents. Jin-Woo looked around while he waited. The place was busy despite being an ordinary weekday afternoon. While he was people watching, the teller's eyes suddenly shot open in shock after seeing his account balance. Whoa! Balance: 1,482,920,001. She checked the numbers again, but it was definitely over $1,000,000,001. Plus, this wasn't an amount he'd saved up over time. More than 100,000,000 had been deposited daily for the past week or so. But he looked so young. The teller had assumed Jin-Woo was a college student who'd come in to update his mother's account, but now she saw him in a completely different light. Her next question was more in her own self-interest. "Oh my! May I ask what you do for a living?" Her cheeks were flushed, and she peeked at Jin-Woo as if embarrassed about asking a personal question. He responded nonchalantly, "I'm a hunter." "Ah." She was already nodding before she realized. So the rumors were true. I've heard that hunters earn quite a bit. She'd had no idea their income was this good. She suddenly felt inferior about being an ordinary salaried employee. A minute ago, he'd been a regular customer like everyone else, but now he was someone from an entirely different world. He must be a high-rank hunter. After all, this was not the account balance of your average hunter. This was her first time meeting a high-rank hunter. The extraordinary circumstances made her heart skip a beat. Ba-dump, be-dump. Her heart beat faster. A young client with a balance in the billions was considered a VIP at the bank. And as a hunter, he was a VVIP. She went into sales mode in order to keep this particular VVIP, pulling products from the bank onto the counter. "Our bank has just released a new product only for our VIP clients, you see." Her smile was genuine, not businesslike. Her eyes were fixed on Jin-Woo. "Oh wow." His hair was a bit messy, and he looked like he'd thrown on whatever clothes were lying around. It seemed like she was catching a glimpse of a day in the life of a capable man who had barely made time for this errand in his busy schedule. "This product has very good reviews from our clients. Would you like to sign up for it?" Jin-Woo declined. "No, thank you." "Oh, I see." The teller sounded disappointed. Worried that things might get drawn out, Jin-woo decided to take his leave. "Thank you for your help. Have a nice day." He ignored her eyes following him as he left the bank. As soon as the door shut behind him, "Phew," Jin-woo breathed a sigh of relief. He'd noticed the way she looked at him differently once he revealed his job as a hunter. The stares and attention of strangers were common for most hunters, but it was all still new to him. "I suppose I need to get used to it." Things would get even worse after he was reevaluated and assigned a higher rank. He'd heard there were tons of reporters and fans who hounded hunters. Looking up, he spotted a soft drink ad featuring a popular hunter on a billboard on the side of a skyscraper. Before Gates appeared, that billboard had probably featured a pop idol or star athlete. That's right. In this day and age, hunters receive more attention and adoration than celebrities. Jin-woo wouldn't be an exception. Really, the only people who didn't like hunters these days were employees of insurance companies. Putting that aside, Jin-woo was able to check his balance after leaving the bank. He was gobsmacked. 1,480. He'd made close to 1.5 billion won from 9 raids. That averaged out to 160 million won per C-rank dungeon. He'd made 180 million won in the C-rank dungeon he'd raided with Dongseok's squad. That put the average income from a C-rank dungeon between 150 to 200 million won. No wonder the teller was impressed. He checked his balance, and after treating himself to a new suit from a department store, Jin-woo got a nice haircut nearby, since he still had time left. He was a totally different person from when he'd left home. It really is nice to have money. They say clothes make the man. Jin-woo looked at his reflection in a store window and rolled his shoulders back. Perfect. At least I'll make a good first impression. He straightened out his clothes before checking his phone and seeing that it was already 4:20. Jaina said to get there by 5. If he left now, he'd arrive right on time. Taxi! The taxi pulled up to the front of Jaina's school at exactly the time she'd specified. Jin-woo saw his sister waiting for him. Jaina! It took a moment for her to recognize him. Jin-woo? She blinked. Are you really Jin-woo Sung? Don't you recognize your own brother? Her voice raised as she looked him up and down. You look like a different person. What? Did you want me to wear flip-flops and sweatpants to this meeting? Well, Jaina could only stare. Your chin's about to fall off. I'm going ahead. Since it didn't look like his sister was about to show him the way, he started off. Jin-woo had been a student at this school 5 years ago, so he knew the building like the back of his hand. The only place a parent-teacher meeting could be was either the faculty room or the guidance counselor's office. Since this meeting was regarding Jaina's university application, he guessed it was probably the latter. Jin-woo's strides quickened. H, hang on. Wait for me. Jaina rushed to keep up with her brother. Hello, sir. Oh, hello. Jin-woo greeted several teachers along the way. They all stopped and stared after him. Who is that? A graduate? But how could I forget such a distinguished student? Is he a new teacher? It wasn't just the faculty who turned to look his way. Wow, he's cute. Who's that? Isn't that Jaina with him? Must be Jaina's older brother. He's pretty cool. A fit body and a fashionable suit were the surefire combination that would make any average-looking guy turn the heads of high school girls. Not that Jin-woo was interested in any of this. The whisperings of high school girls went in one ear and automatically exited the other. On the other hand, Jaina was having tons of fun. She was picking up everything being said about her brother. As soon as she caught up to him, she elbowed him in the side. Hey, you're quite popular. He ignored her ribbing. You don't have a girlfriend, right? He continued to ignore her. Want me to introduce you to a cute high school girl? This time, Jin-woo coolly reached over and pinched her cheek. Stop being silly. Why, yes, sir. As soon as Jin-woo let go, she protested while rubbing her sore cheek. It's so obvious you're enjoying the attention, though. They were still bickering when they arrived at the guidance counselor's office. Jaina, who had taken the lead at some point, spun around to face him. We're here. Jin-woo moved to enter, but stopped when Jaina didn't follow. You coming? It's a parent-teacher only meeting. I have to head back now. Ah. Jin-woo remembered having a similar conference during his own senior year. Only then, he hadn't been able to invite anyone to his meeting. That was when Mom's condition started getting more and more serious. She had been in and out of the hospital a lot back in those days. Jin-woo hadn't told his mother about the parent-teacher meeting because he thought it would be too much for her and, as a result, ended up having to deal with his homeroom teacher's annoyance. Remembering all that made him understand why Jaina had been so anxious about the meeting today, Jin-woo smiled at her. Studying late again tonight? Yeah. You can head home without me. Got it. His hand sneaked up to her hair and mussed it. Study hard. I'll see you at home. Hey, I told you not to do stuff like that. See you later. Jin-woo grinned at her as he entered the office. Jaina pouted as she fixed her hair. Still treating me like I'm a child. Not that she really hated it, but had anyone seen that? She furtively checked to make sure the coast was clear before relaxing and skipping back to class. If Jin-woo had to sum up his first impression of Jaina as homeroom teacher in a single word, it'd be virtuous. Jaina's older brother? She was a middle-aged lady with a kind face and the type of smile that put people at ease. The woman didn't question Jin-woo being there in lieu of a parent, perhaps because she was aware of the family's situation. Pleased to meet you. I'm Jaina's homeroom teacher. Who knew she had such a wonderful brother? Ha ha. After receiving such a warm welcome, Jin-woo bowed politely. I'd never seen her before. She must have started at the school after he had graduated. People say the first impression is the most lasting, and he found himself able to relax after they exchanged greetings. Even though I'm younger than she is, she's addressing me politely. Jin-woo didn't think his sister would have any problems in her senior year with a homeroom teacher like this. Please have a seat. She sat back down, and Jin-woo took a chair across the table from her. You have nothing to worry about concerning Jaina. It was a standard parent-teacher conversation. The dialogue flowed easily. Jaina was a model student, so there was no reason for concern. You're aware that Jaina wants to go to medical school? Yes. The teacher began reading off some notes she'd prepared. Jaina's mock test scores are all excellent, and her grades are very good, so I think she has a great chance. Best not to pressure her too much, though. Jin-woo silently nodded in agreement. The passion on the teacher's face told him that she had high hopes for Jaina. Usually, teachers assigned to senior classes were stressed out about their students' grades, since their scores would basically determine their future. I hear a lot of teachers tried to avoid being assigned as homeroom teachers for seniors. He'd heard that male teachers were often forced to take the senior classes. All things considered, Jin-woo was thankful that Jaina's homeroom teacher seemed to genuinely care. As Jaina's guardian, he was grateful for that fact. About 15 minutes later, the meeting was coming to an end. Well then, Jin-woo was about to get up when the teacher cautiously asked him another question. I heard you currently work as a hunter? Her demeanor turned serious. Jin-woo sensed that she was getting at something. Yes. If Jaina awakened, Would you allow her to become a hunter? No. Never. Jin-woo was firm in that regard. He didn't even have to think about it. Her expression grew somber. That's what I thought. As Jin-woo gave her a puzzled look, she seemed to come to a decision and resolutely asked him, "Could you please do me a favor?" Jin-woo nodded. "If it's something I can do." He decided to hear her out. She was his sister's homeroom teacher, after all, and he didn't want to leave a bad impression by rejecting her outright. She started talking quickly, like she was concerned he might change his mind. "There's another female student who awakened and is trying to quit school. She stopped coming to class a while ago." This was common. Newly awakened people tended to think of themselves as special despite having no experience and not understanding the reality of being a hunter yet. They didn't realize that very few hunters actually became rich and famous. The teacher sighed loudly. "If she keeps skipping class, the school will have no choice but to take action. Though even if she becomes a hunter, shouldn't she at least graduate from high school first?" Jin-woo nodded in agreement. His positive response put her a little more at ease. "Could you help me persuade her to graduate at least?" She managed a small smile. Jin-woo was curious about only one thing. "What rank has she awakened as?" "As far as I've heard, it's the lowest rank." "E rank. She'll get herself killed." He mentally tooted. E rank hunters had to be extremely cautious even when entering a dungeon. If they carelessly set foot in one, it would lead to injuries or even death at least 9 times out of 10. It would break his heart to hear a girl his sister's age going through that. However, in the end, it would all boil down to her choice. No one could make her do anything. Jin-woo felt bad for the girl, but he didn't want to take time out of his busy schedule just to nag at someone about how to live her life. "I don't have any confidence I'll succeed." Not that she'd appreciate it anyway. Jin-woo was about to decline the teacher's favor and get up when China knows too. He found it hard to stand after hearing the name coming out of the teacher's mouth. He confirmed once again. "Sorry, what was the student's name?" Asterisk, 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 asterisk. "Do you know her?" Korea really was a small country, after all. Jin-woo was speechless. Meanwhile, at the home of Myung-han-yu, chairman of Eugene Construction. Since that morning, expensive import cars had been driving in and out of the residence. The reason for this was the ancestral memorial ceremony for Byung-chul-yu, the first chairman of Eugene Group, which was to be held later that evening. Myung-han-yu was the richest man in the business sector, and Byung-chul-yu was his father. As the eldest son, Myung-han performed the ceremony every year regardless of how busy his schedule was. As Myung-han's influence was unparalleled, the entire Yu clan attended the ceremony every year as well. The president of a security company, the chairman of a pharmaceutical company, the president of a department store. Many of them were powerful people themselves, and their children were also the elite of the elite. With one exception. Said exception sequestered himself in a quiet corner away from everyone, even though no one had ordered him to. It was Jin-ho. Boring. He wished this would be over soon. Going on raids with Jin-woo was 1,000 times more fun than this. He wondered what the boss was doing now. Jin-ho really couldn't imagine what Jin-woo did on days off. And thus, Jin-ho sat in his corner where no one could see him, nursing a drink and pondering pointless things. That's when he heard a voice he loathed. "Hey!" It was him. Standing behind Jin-ho was someone who was undeniably a capable man, a shining example of an elite. Tall and sporting expensive frames, he was Jin-sung, Jin-ho's older brother. He was also the heir apparent of the Eugene construction empire. Jin Sung got right in Jinho's face and looked down at his younger brother. "Stop acting like a brat. Our relatives have arrived, so you should come and greet them too. Leave me alone. Remember that every stupid thing you do reflects poorly on father." There was no love for his brother in Jin Sung's overly dismissive words. The dislike was mutual, but Jinho didn't have the guts to stand up to him. His feelings weren't unfounded. Jin Sung was a prodigy among prodigies, and claimed the #1 spot in anything and everything. It wasn't just his grades either. After he graduated, Jin Sung helped his father with various business ventures, all of which flourished. Compared to his older brother, Jinho didn't have anything to brag about. He'd barely even gotten into university. Jinho always felt small next to him. "Pathetic. TSK, tisk." Jin Sung frowned at Jinho hanging his head, then arranged his features into a pleasant smile before striding away. "Uncle!" "Oh, hello, Jin Sung." Jinho could lift his head again only after his brother left. This was why he hated coming home. If it hadn't been for the memorial ceremony. As Jinho continued to sigh, he heard an alluring but sharp voice coming from behind him. "Unbelievable. He's so full of himself." Jinho turned around. It was his cousin Suyun, who was a year older than him. "Did you hear what he just said?" "Seriously?" Suyun approached Jinho and patted him on the shoulder. She put on a sour face. "Watch this. Pathetic TSK, TSK. Pathetic TSK, tisk." Jinho burst out laughing at Suyun's impression. "Hey, stop it. I'm not in the mood. Pathetic TSK, tisk. Ha 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 ha. I said stop." Being close in age, they were good friends. Suyun stopped in front of Jinho. "Why do you let him walk all over you?" "What do you mean? You're an awakened being. Or are you telling me you can't take him? So? You think I should beat him up? Well, maybe not that." She bit her lip. What would his father do if Jinho landed a fist on his so-called successful brother? Even imagining that was horrifying. She understood perfectly why Jinho always let his brother steamroll him. She glared in Jin Sung's direction. In any case, he's still the same asshole. She disliked Jin Sung as much as Jinho did. She was one of a select number of people who knew the real Jin Sung hidden under his polite demeanor. But Jinho didn't agree with her. And it wasn't because Jin Sung was his older brother. It was because he wanted to beat his big brother fair and square instead of talking behind his back. As he stayed quiet, Suyun carefully asked, "So, are you still going to go ahead with that plan?" "Huh? You wanted to become the guild master to show him up." Jinho smiled instead of answering her. Who would believe him anyway? He'd be lucky if people didn't laugh at him. A match between Jinho and Jin Sung. Still, his chances of winning had massively increased thanks to his trump card, Jin Woo. If I can just get a guild master's license. It was doable. Yes, he could do this. Suyun saw the determination in his eyes and put her hands on her hips before saying firmly, "I'd rather die than work under that jerk. I don't want to fight with your father, so you better do this." "Thanks." That was how Suyun cheered him on. She was a former child actor who had awakened as an A-rank hunter. Add the fact that she came from a mega-rich family, and she was one of the most sought-after hunters in Korea. She'd turned down all their offers and chosen to model from time to time instead. However, she'd recently received an offer she couldn't refuse: become a founding member of the Eugene Guild. It was a direct order from Chairman Myung Han-yu himself. Suyun couldn't reject her uncle, but she didn't want to work for Jin Sung. She had a lot of concerns. Still, though she found it difficult to rely on Jinho, she had no choice but to place her faith in him. VMMM, VMMM. Soo-yoon gestured to the phone vibrating in Jinho's pocket. Aren't you going to answer that? Oh. Jinho's mind had been elsewhere, so he belatedly reached for his phone. The number on the screen was a familiar one. Boss. His face lit up after seeing the caller ID. It's me, boss. He answered enthusiastically. Yes, yes, boss. No, I can go. Yes. I'll be right there, boss. He hung up. Soo-yoon was curious as to what had caused his mood to do a 180 like that. What? Who was that? But there was no time to explain it to her. The boss needed him. Because Jinho also wanted out of this place, his only thought was how to leave as quickly as possible. I'll tell you later. Soo-yoon blinked at Jinho as he rushed off. What's gotten him so excited? Jinho always looked like a sad sack at every family gathering, but he'd seemed different just now. Never thought I'd see the day. She definitely needed to grill him about this some other time. Meanwhile, Jinho searched for his father. Dinner would be served soon, and he wasn't allowed to skip a meal without his father's permission when the whole family and other relatives were in attendance. Jinho located his father talking to some people in the distance. The man had a face resembling a tiger and a strict personality. Jinho found it difficult to deal with his father. I haven't even talked to him yet, but he was already nervous, but he needed to be brave. Because I promised. Jinho took 2 deep breaths and walked toward his father. He felt like turning back several times along the way but forced himself to keep walking. Finally, he arrived in front of the chairman. Father! The way they interacted, you wouldn't know they were father and son. Myung-han moved his gaze to Jinho. What is it? The tense atmosphere compelled everyone nearby to scatter. May I be excused for a bit? Jinho's voice was especially meek when he talked to his father. I'll be back before dinner. Myung-han looked like he might cause a scene, but instead, he heaved a deep sigh and reluctantly gave his permission. Go on, then. Jinho brightened and bowed. Thank you, father. Then he was off like a bullet. Stone-faced, Myung-han was watching his son leave when his wife approached. Honey, I got a phone call from Vienna. He'd been waiting on this news. Myung-han's face finally showed some interest. What was the result of the competition? She won. No wonder, given that she's your daughter. His smile was so brief that someone watching him would have thought they were seeing things. When is she coming back to Korea? She's so busy this semester that she can only make it back during the break. Myung-han frowned. I clearly told her to be here for her grandfather's memorial ceremony. Oh, honey. Young people nowadays don't think memorial ceremonies are important. Tisk tisk. His wife straightened the chairman's tie and spoke tenderly to him. And dear, how about paying Jinho some attention? This again. A tiger must care for a tiger cub, not a kitten. Both the tiger cub and the kitten came from me. And they're your children as well. Do you know that was the first time I've seen Jinho smile in your presence since he graduated from middle school? Was that right? Myung-han perked up and fixed his gaze in the direction Jinho had departed, but even that was brief. He answered flippantly, Maybe he has a girlfriend. In any case, everyone is waiting for us. We should head inside. At the Hunters Association headquarters in Gyeongju, Seoul, an employee inspecting devices stopped in front of a small manometer. Huh? What's wrong with this? The number, which should have been fixed at 0, kept fluctuating. It looked like the device was malfunctioning. But that was nothing unusual. It was delicate equipment, known to break often.
Kim! Yes, sir?
The subordinate he'd summoned came up to him.
How many gates were checked with this manometer? Which serial number, sir?
N1744B. Kim nodded as he checked the records.
It was used for 7 gates 2 days ago. 2 days ago? Let me see.
It was true. 2 days ago, 7 gates had been measured with this particular manometer, and 4 of those had now been closed.
Were there any problems with the gates? No, I haven't heard anything. Really?
The employee scratched his stubbled chin. Whenever there was an error with the manometer, rate permits for the gates it had been measured with were canceled right away for obvious reasons. What would happen if hunters entered a gate thinking it was AC rank when it was an A or B in actuality? They wouldn't be able to return safely. High-rank dungeons were that dangerous. It was similar to the difference in power between a high-rank hunter and a low rank. That was why the larger guilds handled all the high-rank dungeons. Should I report this now? Reporting a problem was easy. Not only would there be complaints from the strike squads that would lose their permits, but he would also be blamed if reevaluating the dungeons took too long and there was a dungeon break. Either way, he might get fired. And after all, I did get a job in the association. The Hunters Association was regarded as a public enterprise. To work there, you had to get a certain score on the civil service examination. He felt helpless just thinking about losing his job. That can't happen. He shook his head. It was also pretty clear to the subordinate what he was torn about. He cautiously asked,
"Then, what should we do?"
It had been 2 days. If there was a problem, surely something would have happened by now.
"It should be fine." Is that okay? You think anything would happen? It's already been a couple of days. I guess so.
The underling nodded in agreement.
Just report that N1744B was fine until yesterday, and note that it started malfunctioning today. Understood.
Sangnan, the department manager of the second administration team of the White Tiger Guild. His back cracked as he straightened up from chopping green onions. Crick.
Off.
Today's menu was soybean paste stew. He had mastered many dishes as a single man living on his own for 8 years. The turning point had been 5 years ago. He'd noticed how awful he looked from eating instant food all the time. He decided to learn how to cook for his own good and was now able to whip up any dish even after seeing it only briefly on TV. However, as mastery involved a return to simplicity, and as his skills improved, he found himself mostly making simple dishes like soybean paste stew.
That's the stuff.
Sangnan tasted the dish and was impressed by his own cooking. Too bad he had no one to share it with. It really was a tragedy. Should I invite someone over for dinner sometime? The face of one of his subordinates popped into his head, but he waved it off. As tired as Sangin was of being called an old bachelor, he didn't want people getting the wrong idea from him inviting a male subordinate over for dinner. Speaking of, I wonder how Kitchell's doing with that task. Kitchell was a smart guy who listened well, but he could also be somewhat clumsy. Man, I have to stop thinking about work at home. It was time to eat. Sangnan hummed as he placed the soybean paste stew on the table in his living room. It was normal for him to eat alone while watching TV. The dining table was too big and lonesome to use by himself. Beep. He pressed the remote control as he took a seat. The news was on.
"We've just received breaking news."
One of the few good things about being single was that he didn't have to fight anyone over what to watch. The TV was basically fixed on one channel. Sang-in scooped up some rice with his spoon as he watched the screen mounted on the wall.
A suspicious explosion at the Hunter Command Center building in Washington, D.C. has shocked the nation. Unconfirmed reports indicate fighting among S-rank hunters as the cause.
Huh? That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. He shook his head at the unfortunate news as he listened to the broadcast while carefully selecting which side dish was to be his first bite. There weren't many to choose from, though. The first has to be kimchi.
CCTV footage from near the command center shows a crack suddenly appearing on the side of the building, and
it didn't matter what the news anchor said. Sang-in was completely focused on putting a piece of cool kimchi from the kimchi fridge on some steaming rice. As he was finally about to take a bite, his phone rang loudly.
"Oh, come on.
Who is it now?" Sang-in grumbled as he grabbed his phone, but he rushed to answer it when he saw the caller ID.
"This is Sang-min."
It was Jin Woo. Sang-in was happy to answer the call, but his expression slowly changed to bewilderment as he processed what Jin Woo was asking.
"Excuse me? You want to watch the training of the new recruits?"